Hey True Crime Besties, welcome back to an all-new episode of Serialously. Hey everybody, welcome back to an all-new episode of Serialously with me, Annie Elise. You know what time it is. It is Thursday, so that means it is Headline Highlights, where we are going to break down everything that's going on in the true crime world this week together. And unfortunately, there is no shortage. There are new cases, there are updates to cases, there are some, honestly, twisted and insane cases, like truthfully, through and through. So we're going to be together for a minute, but we have got a lot to go over. Now, as a reminder, if you have not listened to Monday's deep dive yet, you got to go back and listen, okay? Because this case was so twisted and diabolical. I didn't think that I was going to cover it at all, but then the verdict happened just a couple of weeks ago, and not even a couple weeks ago now, like a week ago. And my jaw was on the floor. I cannot believe that this is what the jury came back with. And so I knew I needed to do a deep dive into the case. But it's basically this 17-year-old kid who seemingly has gotten away with murder twice. And not just like random strangers or friends, not that that would make it any better, obviously, but his parents. And a year and a half apart, killed his father, allegedly. It was self-defense, as he was saying. Then a year and a half later, killed his mother in self-defense. Yet both circumstances were extremely similar in the sense that he claims they were both chasing him with a knife. He also claimed that they were trying to kill him. Yet between the gap of when his father died and his mother was killed, or I should say his mother died, that he was telling people that he didn't want to go live with his mother and he didn't want to go home because he would, quote, kill her if he did. It's unbelievable. So you got to go listen if you haven't yet. It is a wild ride. Now let me move my mic. Sorry, it's kind of off to the side. Okay. So today, like I said, we're going through all of the headlines and we're talking about what's been happening more at a high level this week. And so one of the main things that we're going to discuss is Megan Boswell. She is currently standing trial for the murder of her 15-month-old daughter, Evelyn Boswell, from back in 2020. And I touched on it a little bit last week, but this chick is a lunatic, okay? She makes Casey Anthony not look like a saint, but actually kind of makes her look like her long-lost sister, if I'm being honest, because they had very similar stories when it all went down. She's with the nannies, Annie the nanny, I was here, it was this person, my mom, my parents did it, all, you name it. She ripped the play right out of Casey Anthony's handbook. And she gave very disturbing interviews when her daughter was missing. I mean, not just disturbing in the sense that she was smiling and kind of smirking throughout them, but also disturbing in the sense that she would, in these interviews, say, well, I know she's missing, but I know who has her. I know exactly who has her. And if police aren't going to do their job and go get my daughter, then I'm going to go get her myself. And so the news anchors and the reporters were kind of had their jaw on the floor like, wait, what are you talking about? You know where your daughter is? And then go get her. Or why haven't the police? It's a wild ride. So all to say that she is currently on trial. It has been a long-awaited several years. So we're going to go through the trial updates because there have been hours and hours and hours of testimony, and I know you don't have time for all that, so I'm here to give you the recap. We also are going to talk about this stolen mail heist, and mail, M-A-I-L, not M-A-L-E. Just want to clarify that. But we're going to talk about a stolen mail heist that turned into a 23-mile car chase. Another case we'll be discussing is a man who killed his girlfriend while he was high because, get this, he thought that his girlfriend was going to eat him. I know. Yeah, you're probably like, well, did I hear that right, Annie? Yeah, he thought his girlfriend was going to eat him while he was high, so he decided to kill her. Like that was going to solve the problem. Then we are going to talk about another monster parent in Seattle and what's going on with that situation. We also are going to talk about a set of identical twins who literally switched places at a crime scene, and the why behind it all is very fascinating. And we're going to talk about some updates with some people we've talked about before who have now been charged with murder, and we got a lot to talk about. So I'm going to stop talking about what we're going to talk about, and I'm just going to talk about what we're going to talk about. So let's start with Megan Boswell. So like I said, this first case is what a lot of you have been waiting for, and it's regarding the updates in who I have dubbed the Casey Anthony 2.0, Megan Boswell. Now, by the time this episode comes out, there will already have been multiple days worth of testimony. So what I'm going to try to do is really include the biggest takeaways and the updates in the case, but it's definitely going to be more of a shortened version, just giving you the high-level overview. So the trial really started off with a bang, because right away the prosecution showed over 35 pictures of Evelyn's body. This is her 15-month-old daughter who was killed. And these pictures that they showed were specifically from the day that she was found. And as I briefly touched on this last week, the way that she was found was like beyond disturbing. I mean, the use of that word doesn't even do it justice, because Evelyn's body was found wrapped with aluminum foil around her head, stuffed in a trash can, and shoved so hard and disposed of in such a way that her back of her head was touching the upper part of her back, if you can understand what I'm talking about. Like fully contorted. Imagine raising your head up right out of the sky and just continuing to go all the way until the back of your head touches your back. I mean, it's freaking foul. Now, as these pictures were being shown, Megan was seen and heard crying the entire time, though I'm not very sure if anyone actually felt sorry for her. I know I don't, but she was definitely putting on this performance of, this grieving mother. So it seemed like it started off really strong. But then there was a huge, I'll just call it like a whoopsie on the prosecution's end of things. It all started when the mother of one of Megan's exes, Erica Stanley, was on the stand testifying. Now, at one point, Erica was shown what was supposed to be screenshots between herself and Megan from a text thread dating back all the way to January 8th, 2020. Which, okay, no big deal, right? Well, the problem was that the text messages that were shown were altered. And her defense team clocked it right away, and because of that, they started asking for a mistrial.
Judge, it appears what has happened, we have been admitting what I believe to be screenshots, what I think the court believed to be screenshots of text messages, which were ultimately a created document that were taken from a cell phone dump. We have, I don't know how many exhibits of that. Notice that on the last one, that exhibit, it came in admittedly without objection because I thought it was a screenshot of the cell phone dump. Or a screen, not of the dump itself, but of a screen. Hence, screenshot. When the last exhibit was published to the jury, it contained a note that Mr. Horn noticed in the letter of our objection that contained a note made by the district attorney's office. It's already been up on the screen and published to the jury. I have concern now that all of these documents, and I have concern that there could be other errors that we haven't caught.
Now, that might have sounded a little bit confusing, but basically, her team argued that what was shown to the jury was a note of the communications rather than actual screenshots of the text messages. So from what I'm gathering, and if there are any attorneys out there listening, feel free to correct me and tell me if I'm wrong, it's not that that wasn't allowed, although I would think that screenshots would definitely be more accurate and informative, but apparently it was the fact that everybody, including her own defense team, thought that it was, in fact, screenshots of the text thread at first, not just notes on the communication. So the fact that it wasn't made clear that it wasn't a screenshot seemed to be the issue that the defense was taking. And like I said, that's just my interpretation from what the defense was saying. I could be wrong about that, but it seemed like even in that last clip that was a big aspect of why they weren't okay with it, that it was potentially misleading to the jurors and therefore unfair. Now, the state attorney general admitted during all of this back and forth that, yeah, what was shown was not an actual screenshot, but the only thing that was changed was the appearance of how it was presented to the court. And they even went further to just classify it as simply a, quote, human error. So luckily, despite all of this, the judge kind of said like, nope, we're not doing a mistrial. We're not going to do that at all. But he did warn the prosecution about any other slip-ups. And he also even clarified to the jury what to expect when shown these messages so that they aren't led to believe something that it isn't, just in case.
Some of these exhibits appear to be screenshots of conversations, either text, Facebook, Instagram, whatever other social media platform that there is. And they're not actual screenshots. They are snippets of conversations taken from a phone extraction that was done. Okay? And I just want you to understand that. Which means that it's not necessarily a sequential stream of conversations back and forth. Does everybody understand that? Okay.
Now, he can only defend those things for so long, and even if it was all human error, as they were chalking it up to be, this is still a very big case. I mean, whether or not the public or even myself believes that she's guilty, that doesn't mean that she doesn't get a fair trial, where everybody's entitled to a fair trial. So I would imagine that her defense team is even more ready than before to call out even the slightest of errors, just to get a mistrial, to hope for a mistrial. So I just pray that there are no more mistakes made. Now, there have already been many testimonies from law enforcement agencies to friends of Megan's, family members, and so on and so forth. And we'd honestly be here all day if we went through each and every one of them. Now, the majority of the testimonies from Megan's family members or friends all had to do with her strange behaviors when Evelyn had disappeared. After she was reported missing, Megan was just acting not only bizarre in her behavior and how she was acting, what she was saying, but also her weird excuses for where Evelyn was whenever she was asked. Like I said earlier, at one point, even to a reporter on an interview that was being recorded, she said, "I know exactly who has Evelyn, and if the police don't do their job, I'm going to go do it for them." So everybody who was testifying that was close to Megan was basically saying like, yeah, she was exhibiting some really odd behavior and weird excuses during the time that Evelyn was reported missing. And that was really concerning across the board. And one thing that I do want to make sure I mention is that this past Saturday, the jurors were also shown the infamous 2020 interview between Megan and the Sullivan County Police Department. Now, this interview specifically was when Megan had finally admitted that Evelyn was dead, and not just that, but that she knew that she was dead, and this was long before the body was even found. Now, there was some back and forth during the pretrial because her defense team had argued that they wanted to be able to cross-examine an investigator regarding the clips that were to be played for the jurors, and ultimately the judge ruled that it was allowed. Her defense team's argument for the cross-examination had been that this would better show Megan's side of the story to the jurors, and I'll be honest, I don't know exactly if that really worked out in their favor, but I guess that's for the jurors to end up deciding, not me. But it seems a little bit murky. And the reason I say that it's murky is because I don't really know what Megan's team or Megan herself can come up with to try to combat what they were seeing, the jury was seeing in those clips. I mean, she was clearly saying she knew that her daughter was dead. This was long before the body was found. So how the defense is saying, well, wait, we want to cross-examine because we want to come at it from Megan's point of view. What other point of view is there, right? I mean, it's pretty clear what she said. It's pretty clear how she acted on all of these different pieces of interview footage out there. So like I said, this was just a very quick update in what's been going on in the trial. There have been hours and hours worth of testimony so far, but I just wanted to mention the really big takeaways and what's been going on this past week or so. And if you do want to get caught up with the full case because you aren't familiar or you haven't been following, I will link that episode once again in the show notes so that you can get fully caught up to speed. I'm personally it's been years, so I am so ready to see baby Evelyn get justice, the justice that she deserves, because it's just so similar again to Casey Anthony, and you guys know my loathing and disdain for Casey Anthony. And I really hope that the main difference in these two cases, although they are so similar, is that Evelyn actually gets justice where little Kaylee never got it. So I guess we're just going to have to hope and pray that the jury gets this one right, which, my opinion, if I was on the jury, guilty. Now let's move into this next case. It's about the stolen mail scheme that turned into like this wild 23-mile car chase. So this one that I wanted to go over, I decided to talk with you about it because it honestly doesn't even sound real. I mean, when you think of car chases, you probably think of scenes in movies where somebody just robbed a bank or maybe held people hostage or just something big and really dramatic, right? Well, this case began when 3 people decided that stealing people's mail would just be an easy crime for them to do. You know, you just swing by people's mailboxes, grab whatever is in there, and then you dip out. And hopefully you get something good, whether it's a check or something to do with tax season, I don't really know. Now, at least that's what these people imagined. And these 3 suspects who were later identified as 42-year-old Yervu, 35-year-old Amanda Lazaria, and 30-year-old Sombat Yang, they had managed to steal mail from over 100 different addresses in Clovis, California. So at around 3:30 a.m. on February 5th, they were all out driving around, the 3 of them, with this stolen mail in the car, just kind of cruising without a worry in sight. But then a local officer noticed that the vehicle and something about it kind of stood out as being a little bit suspicious. I don't know exactly the details there, but for whatever reason, they turned on their lights and sirens and they decided to pull them over to do a quick check just to make sure everything was okay. However, given that they had a car full of stolen mail, they decided they weren't going to pull over. So instead, they ended up on a 23-mile car chase. Now, the only thing that managed to stop them was when the highway patrol threw out spikes in front of them to pop their tires. So once their tires were popped and they all 3 realized that, continuing to drive away was not going to be an option, they all attempted to run on foot, as though that was going to work. As you can imagine, they were quickly caught. So they were arrested and they were charged with mail theft, possession of stolen property, burglary tools, and last but not least, conspiracy. So needless to say, stealing somebody's mail was definitely not the easiest crime to pull off like they thought that it would be. I mean, again, not the biggest crime out there that we've talked about, but I just thought that it was really interesting because I didn't even know. I know people steal packages and I know they do things like that, but I didn't know that people will still steal actual letter envelopes. I mean, I know for identity theft and all of those things, yes, but and maybe that was the goal in all this, to just have heaps of mail and steal a bunch of people's identities. I don't really even know, but I just thought it was interesting, so I wanted to mention it. Now let's talk about this case, because this is crazy town, because a man's paranormal meter that he had, which I didn't even know a lot of people own these, but apparently they do, it apparently scared him into killing his girlfriend. So a few weeks ago, we talked about the Slender Man stabbings and how crazy all of that was in general. And this next case kind of reminds me a lot of that. Now, being in the true crime world, you hear a lot about motives and excuses and different things for reasonings for crimes. But it's pretty rare that a mythical creature or even the paranormal is the reason for committing a gruesome murder. Yet, here we are. Now, this case originally took place on January 3rd. However, it wasn't until more recently, when there was a hearing, that it really started hitting the major news outlets and getting major headlines. So on January 3rd, 46-year-old Jared Wolf shot and killed his girlfriend, 46-year-old Jane White. But like I said, his reasoning was way more out there than what we typically hear of. There were no cheating allegations, no intense breakups gone wrong, no love triangle, nothing like that. See, that night, Jared and Jane went over to a mutual friend's house. They just were going to go have a casual hangout sesh. Now, at some point, Jared began smoking what he at first claimed was marijuana, but later admitted that he wasn't sure what it was. So after getting high, Jared, his friends, and Jane all decided that they wanted to kind of whip out his paranormal meter. Maybe check for ghosts, check for I don't know what else it would be, paranormal activity, but they thought that that would be fun to do. Now, I'm just assuming that it was maybe an EMF reader or something like that. It's kind of meters that people use when they're actually ghost hunting, but whatever it was, Jared put the reader up to a statue that was inside his friend's house. And apparently, this reader not only went off, but it was as high as it could possibly go. But instead of thinking that, okay, the statue was haunted, or maybe even the house that they were at was haunted, somehow he came to the conclusion that somebody in that room must be trying to kill him, and even worse, eat him. Now, that is a sentence I definitely never thought that I would be saying on here. Somebody's using their paranormal reader and thinks that somebody's not only trying to kill them, but eat them as well. That being said, I also highly doubt that they were just smoking weed. I would imagine that there was something else laced in there. So after scanning all of this, in a complete panic, Jared went outside. Then when he was outside, he grabbed his gun and started heading back inside, just really trying to prepare and defend himself against this friend or girlfriend that was now a murderous cannibal who was after him. And somehow during all of this, his girlfriend Jane ended up outside. Now, I would assume it was to check on Jared after he had stormed out. But unfortunately, when she went out to check on him, that's when he shot her in the chest. By the time someone called the paramedics and they arrived, Jane had already died. Now, the reason that this case is just now being talked about is because on February 5th, a hearing in the case was held, and it was wild. I mean, the hearing pretty much was to confirm that Jared would in fact stand trial because he's being charged with 7 different things overall. I mean, ranging from first-degree murder to third-degree murder, even 2 counts of aggravated assault. Now, since it's all so fresh, there isn't a trial date that has been announced yet, but people are wondering what his defense will be, what exactly he's going to say. Is there any ring camera footage? Is there cell phone footage? What were they smoking? Will her autopsy show anything? Like, is there something below the surface here? Or was he just incredibly high, whether it was laced with, I don't know, meth, fentanyl, things like that, and then his mind just got the best of him and he thought that his girlfriend was going to kill him and eat him? I don't know. This is why I say, guys, don't do drugs. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. You don't know what's laced with what these days. Just don't do it. Get high on life, okay? All right, now this is another case of a monster parent. And I don't know. I really wasn't sure if I was going to talk about this one because it is really difficult, especially as a parent. But we always say the reason we talk about them, despite how difficult they are, is because it's very important to have the awareness. It's important to let their voices continue to be heard. And I just want to warn you, this next case is extremely hard to hear, so huge trigger warning. So just recently, on February 4th, 2025, 29-year-old Dania Young of Seattle was charged with second-degree murder. This was in the death of her 14-year-old son, and the charge stemmed after an incident that took place back on January 30th. Her 14-year-old son's name was Jameer Robinson. Now, 14-year-old Jameer's cause of death was multiple blunt force trauma. It was reported that he also suffered from something called sudden inflammatory response syndrome. And if you're like me, you may not have ever heard of that before. You may not even know what the heck it means. But apparently, this is when blood is sent to so many different parts of the body, all in an attempt to heal them, that there isn't enough blood left to properly keep the heart pumping and running as it should. So basically, think of that. If you have injuries on your hands, your fingers, your toes, your feet, your legs, and all of your blood from your heart is pumping to those places, trying to heal them, trying to repair them, then there's no blood left in your heart to keep it pumping. And that's what this is. That's what sudden inflammatory response syndrome means. Now, this response in his body came after his mother apparently brutally beat him with an extension cord after he allegedly didn't do some chores that she had asked him to do. As you can imagine, she didn't just hit him once, twice, or even 3 times, but his autopsy report showed that he had 1,172 marks on his body. I don't think that I've ever heard of a case that has been this brutal or with that many injuries found to a body. It is honestly, it's hard to even calculate that in your mind and envision it. And with an extension cord, I would just imagine that it was continuous whippings after whippings after whippings. And this wasn't just some crazy, spur-of-the-moment, overkill, overbeating type of situation, because 74 of the injuries were either on his head or face, and 10 to 20 of them were in various stages of healing. So this, of course, indicated that a lot of these injuries were already there before he was attacked this most recent time. And even after he stopped yelling for help, stopped moving altogether, stopped fighting back, his mother just continued hitting him until she literally couldn't anymore. His mother even told the investigators that she, quote, lost count of how many times she hit him. Which I can imagine after about 100 of those things, 100 hits, you probably would lose count, right? And I mean, think of that. How long does that take someone? If you were taking a cord and hitting a pillow up and down just over and over, how long would it take to get to 1,172? Quite some time, right? And in fact, it was a long time because this whole thing happened over the span of 3 hours. Now, the saddest part is that he passed away not long after the medics transported him to the local hospital. So he was alive for the majority of this beating. And it's so heartbreaking to wonder if possibly, if she would have stopped earlier than she had, could he still be alive? Probably. He hung on so long. But instead, she decided for whatever reason, whatever sick and twisted reason, that she was going to continue for 3 hours straight, never lessening the brutal beating until he was finally no longer conscious and just really barely hanging on by a thread. Now, not surprisingly, this wasn't the first time that she had laid hands on him either. She claimed to have started hurting him all the way back last November. This was after he came to visit her and was never returned to his sister, who was his legal guardian. So he shouldn't have even been in her home to begin with. And what's maybe worse, if that's even possible, is that her husband, who also is his stepdad, was at the home the entire time. He no doubt heard him begging for his life, begging for his mom to stop, his wife to stop. And not only that, but he had physically seen her beat him several times in the past. He knew that these kinds of things were happening, yet he never intervened. He never stepped in and tried to help this 14-year-old little boy who, again, by the way, should never have been in her possession. So when the investigators asked him why he never stepped in or why he never called the authorities, he simply said, "My best bet is to mind my own business." In fact, the only time he ever stepped in was that final day when he found her in a complete panic, yelling that she finally had gone too far this time, that her son wasn't waking up. That's the only reason that he decided to call 911. Not because he had witnessed these things, not because he knew what was happening to this innocent boy in the home, but because now his wife was in a panic because she was screaming, "I've gone too far, I don't know what to do." So that is what prompted him to make the call. It is so sick and so disgusting. So thankfully, this monster mother's bail has been set to $3 million, which she has not been able to post. Her next hearing is set for this week, so I guess we'll see if there are any notable updates to come back to in this case to revisit it. I don't really have any information on whether or not the stepdad was arrested either, but I really do hope that he was. He was charged with neglect, enabling something, because every part of me believes he was equally involved. He could have either stopped it at any point, perhaps in past moments he participated, but for him to just get off scot-free does not sit right with me. So we'll follow this and I'll see what comes out of it. Now, before we get into any other cases, we are going to take a quick break here from today's sponsors. And as always, thank you guys for understanding that sponsors are what keeps this podcast free. Okay, so real talk here. I have spent so much money on skincare, on hair products, just all these things over the years trying to fix my dry skin, my frizzy hair, my breakouts, you name it. But then it hit me, and I saw it all over my TikTok feed, so I'll thank TikTok for that, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was completely ignoring the actual root cause, which was, of course, the water that I was showering in. We all know how important it is to filter the water we drink, right? Whether you use a Brita, whether you have the machine, whether you drink alkaline, whatever it is. But why don't we think the same way about our shower water? Because that's what's going into our body, onto our body. Well, that's where Jolie comes in. It's a filtered shower head that removes chlorine and heavy metals. So basically all the stuff that is secretly messing with our skin and our hair. And let me just tell you, when I installed Jolie, it was so easy to do. You just literally replace your shower head with this one. It totally changed my skin. It was way less dry. My hair was less frizzy and coarse feeling. There was less shedding. And I feel like my blonde actually stays blonde and doesn't get all yellow and brassy. Plus, it's the only clinically tested filtering shower head that's out there. And it still has amazing water pressure and it looks super sleek. I mean, the design looks super modern, super nice. It's not ugly. It's not some big eyesore. So it's really a win-win. You've probably seen it on your social media feeds too, but I finally tried it and I'm here to tell you it works and it is the best. So if you're tired of spending a fortune on products just to fight the damage that your shower water is actually causing, this is your fix. Jolie will give you your best skin and hair guaranteed. Head to jolieskinco.com/AE to try it out with free shipping. And guess what? If you don't love it, you can return it within 60 days for a full refund. No questions asked. But trust me, you're not going to want to send this back. You are going to love it. All right, guys, I've talked to you about this before, but I feel like I have to tell you again about my Helix mattress because I genuinely don't know how I ever slept without it. My bed feels like a literal moon cloud. Aside from tossing and turning all night, I used to wake up with like weird hip pain and weird back pain because I'm a side sleeper. I also would get too hot. It wasn't the best. And don't even get me started on when I tracked my sleep on the Oura Ring because my recovery scores, not my actual sleep scores, but my recovery scores were like in the garbage. But then I tried Helix, and the reason I tried Helix was because it shipped so easy in a box and it seemed like it was just like, a no-brainer for me. I like things easy. I like things seamless. It wasn't even necessarily about the mattress, although I heard that they were really good. But then when I unboxed it and put that mattress down, it literally changed my life. And get this, I think I told you guys before, my mom sometimes will spend the night when she's helping me out with the kids. And she recently spent the night in my bed a couple months ago. And she loved it so much. She's like, oh my gosh, your bed is so comfortable. It's so soft. It's so like fluffy. What is it? And I told her, I was like, oh, it's my Helix mattress. It's this new mattress I got. And it has like this like pillow top thing. It's the best. She loved it. So I decided to surprise her with a Helix as well. And she is so happy, and she was like bragging to my brother and my sister about it. Obviously I'm the best sibling. But then I told them, I was like, you guys got to come over too. Like, I'm gonna get everybody hooked on this mattress. It literally feels like a moon cloud. And the best part about all of it is that Helix mattresses are all personalized to you. You take a quick quiz, it matches you to the perfect mattress based on how you sleep. There's no guessing, there's no wrong choices. It's so easy, and it just works. So if you've been thinking about upgrading your sleep, now is the time. Helix is doing their biggest President's Day sale ever, which you'll get 27% off site-wide plus 2 free dream pillows with your mattress purchase. And if you get a Luxe or an Elite mattress, you also get a free bedding bundle. So 2 dream pillows, a sheet set, and a mattress protector. So don't wait. This is exclusive for my listeners, and it's better than what you'll find on the site. So go to helixsleep.com/serialously for the best deal ever. Again, that's helixsleep.com/serialously. Your best sleep ever is literally one click away, my friends. Okay, so now we're going to get into this next case that is so bizarre because it's about twins who literally switched places at the scene of a crime. Now, as someone who is very close with her sister, I can confidently say that there's definitely a lot of things that I would do for her. However, there is a pretty fine line between the things that I would do for her and apparently what some other people would do for their siblings, which, sorry, Amy, if you're listening, I'll do anything for you, but not this. Because one thing I'm not going to do is trade places with her at a crime scene, let alone one that ended in the death of 2 young kids. I mean, you're on your own there, sister. Figure it out yourself. But like I said, apparently I'm like the outlier with that option because this case originally happened in September of 2023. And the 2 people involved were charged around this time last year in February of 2024. But just recently, though, we're seeing a plea deal in the case. So let's go a bit more into what exactly happened and why this case is being brought back up now in 2025. So on September 25th, 2023, a woman named Samantha Peterson crashed her SUV into this horse-drawn buggy of an Amish family that was heading to school that morning. Samantha was intoxicated, which led to her not seeing that buggy and then crashing into it. But this crash wasn't just a little bump or fender bender. It was really bad. 2 members of this family, the Miller family, were only 7 and 11 years old, and they both passed away as a result of the crash. One of the horses carrying the buggy also died from its injuries. So, I mean, this was pretty severe. That was really I don't want to say a lot of pressure, but high impact. To kill a horse? I mean, come on. Now, instead of taking ownership and accountability, Samantha called her identical twin sister, Sarah. Not for support, not for advice, not to figure out what to do, but rather to take the fall for it. Now, for whatever reason, Sarah did just that. Now, I don't know if they really didn't think that anybody would catch on, but they obviously did. And maybe she only agreed to take the blame because she, at the time, didn't have any clue that 2 young kids had passed away. Maybe she thought she was just helping her sister get out of getting a DUI charge. Maybe that's what she thought she was helping with. But even though they tried to be sneaky, witnesses at the scene immediately noticed the different clothing that each woman was wearing. That was the biggest sign that something really fishy was going on. Now, of course, there's much more to this case, but I'm trying to keep it short and simple. But the irony of the whole case is that Samantha really convinced her sister to take the fall so that she wouldn't go to jail. And in the end, both of them ended up in jail. So like I said, this time last year, they both ended up being charged. Samantha, the sister who actually hit the family, was charged with 21 different counts. 2 days later, Sarah was charged with 16 different counts. Now let's get into the whole reason why I'm even talking about this case today, because I know it happened back in 2023. But last Tuesday, Sarah did what was probably the smartest thing she could have done, and she took a plea deal. Now, the deal seems like a no-brainer to me because in exchange for simply admitting that she took the fall for her sister and that Samantha had begged her that day to say that she was the driver, she only is going to face 4 years of probation and potentially 6 months in jail. And this is all because in exchange for that deal, 14 of the 16 counts against her are being dropped. Now, although her deal hasn't been formally accepted by a judge, it is scheduled to be accepted on March 31st, and then after that, the sentencing will be held. So I'm not sure whether or not she will get any credit for any time served. I mean, I guess we'll have to wait and see about that for another month or so. I don't know. But as for Samantha, she's still very much on the chopping block. Now, many of her charges have been dropped since last year, so the only current charges against her are criminal vehicular homicide, felony criminal operation, driving while impaired, and careless driving, which I say that like, oh, the only charges against her, but that's obviously a lot, and those are obviously very severe. But her trial is currently set for July 17th, which will honestly kind of fly by, and it'll be here before we know it. So who knows, maybe I'll do a deep dive into the case to prep for the trial if you guys are interested, but it is so wild to me, like how they thought they were going to get away with this, why the sister would say yes to switching places with her, and now the sister flipping on the other sister, taking a plea deal, and probably will have to testify, I would imagine, against her sister. It's just wild, wild, wild. Now, this next story is very interesting. We talked about Aaron Hernandez a few months back. We did a full deep dive into that case. There was a lot to talk about. There were a lot of different theories out there. But now the brother of Aaron Hernandez has been sentenced after he threatened to shoot up multiple universities. So the reason it caught my eye is because the main person in this case has a pretty prominent last name, as I said. But Dennis Hernandez, brother of the infamous Aaron Hernandez, who was, remember, serving a life sentence for murder at the time of his death, he recently had his name in the limelight, not his brother's. But it wasn't for anything great, not for any good reasons. Last Friday, Dennis was sentenced in regards to an incident back in 2023 where he actually threatened to shoot up 2 huge universities, University of Connecticut and Brown. Now, these threats were pretty insane because in one post to Instagram, Dennis straight up said, quote, "Will I kill? Absolutely. I've warned my enemies, so pay up front." Apparently, he even showed up at these universities, which is a very terrifying thought to imagine that he was so dead set on executing this plan that he actually showed up to these schools. According to the police reports, he went as far as going into multiple classrooms on the university's campus and was also mapping out where he was going to go, just like fully coming up with this elaborate plan. And the reason for all of this? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Apparently, someone owing him money was something that he was continuously ranting about during the time that he was planning all of this. So I don't know if maybe this person was a student at the campus and that's what was going to happen. It really, it makes no sense to me. However, a woman in his life at the time who has only been identified as a victim in the police reports, she spoke out about his continuously deteriorating mental health. And she also made it pretty clear that her belief was that he was having a mental health crisis. So like I said, last Friday he was sentenced, and I'm pretty curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on the sentence because he was given 18 months in prison. However, he was also given time served. So I'm not exactly sure how much time was shaved off of his sentence for that. On top of that, he would be sentenced to 3 years of supervised release, which would also include things like continued mental health and substance abuse treatment. His phone would be monitored. He, of course, cannot go on the campuses that he threatened, which I feel like that sounds pretty fair to me. But I want to know what your thoughts are. I mean, do you feel like all of that is fair? Or was it a bit of a lenient sentence given the types of threats that were made, given the planning that went into this? I don't know. It kind of feels a little lenient to me. Now, another case that I want to touch on, and I really want to get your feedback on, is Belle Gibson. I don't know if it's just me, but I binged so hard this last weekend on Netflix and watched, have you heard of it? It's called Apple Cider Vinegar. And it kind of gives Anna Delvey vibes in the sense that it's about like an influencer who is scamming people, making up lies, getting money. Although this was, in my opinion, even like more down and dirty than Anna Delvey because she was lying about cancer and things like that. But it was not that long ago. It was a few years back or whatever, not a few years, probably like 8 to 10. But it was this Australian influencer named Belle, and this like reenactment docuseries or made for TV series, I don't know what the exact word is called. It wasn't an actual documentary, but it reenacts everything and tells the story. And I found it so fascinating. And like I said, there's not a murder that takes place, but it's about scamming. It's about influencers, the power of social media, and it really follows her entire like climb and fall of the whole thing. And I thought it was really interesting. So I don't know why I'm bringing it up. I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is because it definitely went into detail, but as we know, a lot of these series don't always go into like the nitty gritty details where I like to go. Like I like to pull out everything and figure out every single detail about a situation. So part of me is wondering if I should do a deep dive on Belle. Because now she's like still living with, I think she served time, but now she's out maybe. I can't remember exactly. They didn't even go into all of those details, but I think she's still with her either common law partner or now husband. And I just find it very interesting because she was also kind of like a single white female of this other woman who actually did have cancer and who documented everything and unfortunately passed away. So I know I'm ranting and I'm not making a lot of sense, but I guess my reason for bringing it up is first and foremost, I found it really fascinating. But also I'm wondering if you guys have watched it or if you would be interested in the deep dive or not. Or if you're like, no thanks, Annie. But things like that, things like Anna Delvey, things like the Tinder swindler, things like this, I get very interested because it's not only the scam element, but how social media plays such a huge role in it, which we always say, you can't trust a freaking single thing you see on social media, right? But this just kind of takes it to like a diabolical level because she was literally fundraising for other families who had children that were cancer patients and needing surgeries, yet she took all the money, didn't give them the money. She said she had terminal brain cancer but was able to overcome it because she ate whole foods, natural foods. She wrote a book about it. She had an app called The Whole Pantry. Like she was so incredibly famous as an influencer for her story, and it was all fake. So I keep talking in circles. I guess let me just stop talking and say, if you want the deep dive, let me know. Maybe I'll just do the deep dive on my own for my own sanity. I don't know. All right, guys, that is it for this week's headline highlights. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't listened to that deep dive from Monday about the 17-year-old boy who basically got away with killing both of his parents, go listen to it now. I'm going to be back with you on Monday with a fresh deep dive in a new case. And then tomorrow, if you need a bonus episode to listen to, as always, you can unlock the 75 bonus episodes on Apple Podcasts or over on patreon.com/AnnieElise. But the one we're talking about tomorrow is a truly nightmare of a neighbors who lived side by side for years, who like feuded with each other, fought all the time, and it ended up with murder. And then what we talked about last week, which you can actually go listen to right now and binge, is the woman who disappeared from Texas, Suzanne Simpson, and her husband. And it gives Barry Morphew vibes if you followed that case at all. So you can go listen to that one right now. I also put up there the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni deep dive I did with my sister. Not deep dive, I guess I should say. It was over an hour, but we talked all about it, my sister and I, just casually, like off the cuff. So that's on there too. You can listen to that. And again, you can do all of that at patreon.com/AnnieElise or directly on the podcast app for Apple. All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And until the next one, don't join any cults. Be nice. Don't kill people. Just get a divorce and just be a good human. All right. Thanks, guys.